All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Culture Compasses, What's Your True North? A few housekeeping notes. If you have any questions for our speakers, please utilize the Q&A or chat feature. And we are recording this webinar, and it will be available on our website and social media channels after this presentation. And don't forget, part 2 is going to be on April 20th at 11 a.m. And that one is called Culture Compasses, How Are You Adding Value? Now I would like to introduce our speakers. We have Nancy Cummings of Cummings Collaborative. As a strategy and leadership consultant, Nancy walks alongside small businesses and nonprofits when change becomes necessary. With decades of diverse executive experiences, Nancy is a dynamic visionary leader. She is a people-centric agent of change and loves to champion transformation in organizations. Nancy's unique blend of academic degrees and formal training positions her well to recognize and inspire cultures that promote core values and align companies for long-term success. Along with being a care partner for her father, Nancy loves outdoor adventures and exploring with Bailey, her adorable rescue dog. And our other speaker is Monte Drenner of MTC Counseling. Monte is a self-proclaimed military brat who grew up moving around the globe. He graduated from high school in Frankfurt, Germany, and attended the University of Florida on an Army ROTC scholarship. After 7 years as an Army intelligence officer, he entered the counseling field. Monte currently is a licensed mental health counselor and master certified addictions professional. For the past 30 years, Monte has helped individuals, couples, families, and organizations lead more productive lives by helping them obtain better mental and emotional health. Monte and his wife, Sandy, started MTC Counseling in 2007 based in Windermere, Florida. They love working together and seeing people change. Monte and Sandy have been married for 39 years and have 2 adult married daughters. Nancy and Monte, take it away.
All right, we will be glad to. Okay, let's make sure we get it right. How is that, Amanda?
Good to go.
Okay. Well, first off, we want to start by saying thank you so much for joining us today. And we're so excited that you're here and that you're interested in exploring about culture, because it's such a priority right now in all of our businesses. And I want to start by sharing this quote with you. And I am going to read it, and I hope you read it along with me. You will never exceed the limits culture sets on your work together, because culture, like the air we breathe, is everywhere and touches everything. And that's to set the tone, to just realize that every single thing we do every single day in our companies, our businesses, our churches, our schools, our nonprofits, helps create and define culture. And I'm going to share a visual. I love this visual. It's from Deloitte Insights, and they're one of the resources that I use for a lot of my work. And just like the quote that we shared from the Center for Creative Leadership, this image shows how truly interconnected all things are to culture. And so it doesn't matter if it's something like your technology, or it's finances, or it's employee training, or leadership development. Anything relationship driven and anything that's internal to your processes, and all things innovation and improvement, are all about culture and are driven by culture. And so, like the quote said, everything that we do all day is all about culture. It is the air that we breathe, like it or not. And before we go any further, what I want to do is share just a little bit about me and invite you into what my reality is. You see the picture in the middle, that's Daddy. Daddy is the center of my life, and I am his care partner. And I'm very blessed to be here in his most challenging season of life. I love the outdoors. I love hiking and exploring and celebrating and enjoying life. And doing that with the people that I love is an absolute treasure. And my silly little puppy is there on the bottom right. Her name is Bailey, and she loves to go out and about and explore with me. And one of my greatest passions is living a healthy life and being able to inspire others to do the same. And I like to do that through things like gardening and cooking and living an active life that allows me to share and be with others. What I want to do now is ask Monte to step in and share a little bit about himself as well, and then we'll get started.
Well, good morning, guys. This is my first opportunity with the South Lake Chamber, and I really appreciate it and glad to be a part of this time together here with Nancy. She's reached out to me to collaborate. She lives up to her name, Nancy, the Cummings Collaborative, and I'm very grateful for that as well and the opportunity to share some time with you guys. So the picture in the middle, that's my wife. As Amanda shared, we've been married 39 years, and we purposely took this picture on a butterfly bench because we are real big fans of transformation. That's what we feel like we do with people in our practice. That's what we feel like we do with people whenever we can work with them, and no matter what the environment is. And so there's definitely a special place in heaven for that lady right there. And then as you go down to my left, probably your left as well, that's my youngest daughter, her husband. He just got out of the Air Force. This is Kelsey and Gideon. He's got an engineering degree, works at Lockheed Martin, unfortunately in Denver, where she was working here, but it didn't work out that way. And to the far right, to the other couple, that's my oldest and her husband. They are living in London. That's Christine and Pavel. And just to the top there, you see the little onesie. That's a gator onesie because they are with child. And come August 28th, there will be another young gator into the world. And just grateful to have all these guys in my life.
That's fabulous. Thank you for sharing that, Monte. I'm going to move now into this quote, and I think this is fascinating. It's very enlightening. So listen and look at it as well, okay? Culture is key to unlocking an organization's greatest potential, yet senior leaders often struggle to identify and leverage the functional aspects of their organization's culture so its power can enhance their brand, improve business results, and fulfill their organization's purpose. And what's extracted out of here is that culture is key to your greatest potential, yet most people struggle to tap into it. And we know that culture impacts your brand, your bottom line business results, and it also impacts your employees or your people's ability to fulfill their purpose and mission while they're with your company. And let's talk a little bit about what is culture. And there are a couple of things that the organizational experts say and use to describe culture. And so we know culture is difficult to grasp because if it was simple, everybody would get it right and no one would have the struggles that we do with culture. It's very elusive. It's something like trying to catch water with your hands. It is a challenge. It's attainable, but it's a challenge. And we also know it's one of the most important things about your organization because it does several things. Culture boils down really to how we do things around here. And it's not necessarily processes and procedures. It's not written word. It's not what you're putting out on a meeting agenda. Culture really is how you live out, how you act, how you behave. And Monte will tap into some of that. And it really means actions speak louder than words. It's not what I say, it's what I do. And people want to know how much I care before they know how much I know. The other thing I want to tap into is culture belongs to everyone. Everyone who's a part of your organization should be a part of your culture. It should be something that organically bubbles up from within. And not only should they be a part of helping define it, they should be a part of helping resolve it if there's something that needs to be changed. And they should be considered as a treasured voice when you get to have the conversations about your culture and purpose and brand identity. And culture begins with your purpose. Your people help fulfill your culture, but your culture begins with your purpose. You have to know why you're there and what you're about. And the other thing that we see often, especially right now, is your culture should be unique to your own organization. A lot of people are looking around and seeing how people have scrambled the last 12 months to 18 months, and they're trying to do what other people did. And that's not going to work for your organization because your culture is unique to you, your people, your purpose, and your process. And so you want to make sure, while there's much to learn from the successes of others, you want to make sure that your culture is unique to your organization. And what I'd like to do right now is take about 30 seconds real quick and write down the first 3 things that come to your mind about the organization where you work. You can write that on paper, on your phone, on your tablet, crayon or pen. The first 3 things that come to mind when you think of your organization's culture. Okay, and keep that nearby because we're going to come back to that. So let's talk about why culture matters. And there are 6 bullets here, and I'm going to give you a little backstory to each one of those. So there's so much more to this. There are just organizations who have done compelling research for decades and decades. And Monte and I are going to sniff this down to 2 presentations this week and next. But let's talk about some of this stuff. Why does culture really matter? Well, culture matters because it determines your brand. And we know the most successful companies have a compelling brand promise that they make to their customers. And that's what differentiates them from the competition. And we also know that if an organization does not deliver on that promise, the result is devastating. Guys, listen to this. Only 26% of US employees believe their organization always delivers on the promise they make to their customers. Also, less than half of US employees agree that they know what their organization's brand is and what differentiates them from their competitors. So less than a third believe that the company can deliver on it, and less than half even know what it is. Imagine walking that out every day. The next thing is culture brings purpose and brand to life. And so culture is your true north. That's where we got the title from. Culture is your GPS. It's what guides you. It's how you and your organization uniquely live out your purpose and deliver your brand promise to all of your customers and really to all of your stakeholders. And culture is something that should be communicated daily because that's what reinstills your values and your purpose. We also know that culture attracts world-class talent. People want to work for the organizations that live out their mission, especially our millennials and youngers. And we know that culture becomes your reputation. It's not just your brand, it's your reputation. And people will want to work for a company because of their mission and because of their brand reputation than they will be before their product or their service. And so people will be attracted to you because of your culture. We also know that culture creates alignment. And what that means is that everyone in the company, everyone in the organization thinks and talks about the company in the same way, whether I'm talking to potential prospective clients and companies, stakeholders, donors, funders, board members. The way that I deliver the message is consistent and it's clear. And all of us deliver that same consistent, clear message to anyone we're talking to about the organization. And the next thing is that culture focuses engaged employees. It helps influence the way people work together. It helps determine how decisions are made, which behaviors get rewarded, and who gets promoted. And culture also sets the tone and is a major, major force behind who's attracted to the company or not. And last thing we'll mention here is that we also know culture affects performance. And there's a direct link between an employee's understanding of the organization's purpose and culture and the measures of business health. And that can be things like finances, bottom line dollar revenue, net loss or net gain of customers and clients and acquisition. And I'll go back to what we said earlier and how we started, because culture can be difficult to define. It's often viewed, and I'm going to do an air quote, it's often viewed as a soft and possibly unnecessary priority. And as we learn more and more, especially in today's society, we know that that's so far from the truth, and that can be damaging to your brand reputation, and it can be very costly to your bottom line. This is a quote from Gallup, and I think it's fascinating. And listen to what it says, and then think about the 3 things that you wrote down about your organization while we talk about this. So more powerful than strategy and more persistent than vision, the culture of an organization affects who stays, who leaves, and how we deal with each other. It's the environment that enables performance or subverts it. And I want to just take a second to talk about what that means. And you're either enabling, you're enhancing, and you're optimizing performance, which we know is directly linked to your business bottom line health, or it's creating a situation where good, bad, or indifferent, it's encouraging unwanted and unexpected behaviors. So culture is the driving force, and culture is what makes the biggest difference in the outcomes of organizations. These are some very interesting facts and from very well-known and renowned people who have studied organizational culture and organizational behavior for a long time. Peter Drucker is the most famous, and he, years and years ago, started using this quote, and a lot of people became uncomfortable with it. And culture eats strategy for breakfast every single day. And I know a lot of people want to have the policies and processes, they want to have the strategies. And as a consultant who deals a lot with business strategy and organizational strategy, we like to think that that's the key, but it's not. The research is overwhelmingly compelling that strategy rules always. And if you don't, that culture rules always. And if you don't have the right culture in place, it doesn't matter what the rest of your policies and procedures are, they won't become enacted. We also know that culturally aligned organizations return 268% more value to their stakeholders because the employees believe it and because the stakeholders have bought into it. 50% of your competitive difference is due to having a purposefully aligned culture. And so when you look at companies and organizations that are your benchmark or your peer and aspirant, and you wonder why they're doing so well, or maybe they're not, it's because they have a purposefully aligned culture. Culture also accounts for 40% of the differences between high and low performing companies in terms of revenue, profits, customer satisfaction, and retention. And also things with leadership effectiveness and employee engagement. And we've alluded to those a couple of times throughout this, but those are the key things when you're trying to say, okay, Nance, that's great, but how does culture really tie to the bottom line? Well, we know definitively it impacts all of these areas, and those are all measurable. And those are metrics that we can glean quarterly and see, okay, based on how we're doing with our culture, goodness gracious, our customer satisfaction has gone up. Look, we're retaining employees, we're keeping longer term customers. And so that's something to think about. LSA Global also shares that an aligned culture can increase productivity by as much as 25%. And so imagine having a 268% return on value to your stakeholders, being 50% more competitive than your aspirant organizations, and having an increase in productivity of 25%. Do you think that's going to make a difference in the outcomes of your business? I think that'd be pretty cool. And then Deloitte Insights also shares that having an aligned culture simply makes everything else easier. So when we know why we do what we do, and we live it and we breathe it and we buy into it, things just fall into place, and that's where the magic actually happens. So what I'd like you to do right now, go back and look at those 3 things that you wrote down at the very beginning about your organization's culture. And I'm going to leave this slide right here, and I just want you to spend about 30 seconds on it. Are you seeing a direct link to performance and business health at this point? And when you look at the 3 things that you wrote down, are they helping your business health, or are they hurting your business health? Okay, and we can always come back to that. You can reach out to myself or Monte or Amanda if you have any questions on any of this. And I want to talk right now about 5 drivers of culture. And we mean that in a good way. Sometimes the word drive is seen as an aggressive term and not necessarily positive. But there are some key things that drive culture in organizations. And the first thing is leadership and communication. And I've already said this, but we know actions speak louder than words. And the most influential messages are expressed through and by the actions of the leaders in an organization. And again, it doesn't matter what they're saying, it matters how they're saying it and how they're acting and behaving. And again, from the behavioral perspective, Monte's going to touch on that in just a little bit. The second area that can drive culture is values and rituals. And these set the tone really for how people interact within the organization, whether it's internal communications and beliefs or their external out to stakeholders. And what we know about the values and rituals is that they need to be relevant to day-to-day expectations across all employees, across all departments, across all aspects of the business. We know within this that only 23% of employees in the US agree that they can apply their organization's values to what they do in their job every single day. And so that means you have about 87% of your employees walking around not being able to connect the organization's values to what they're actually getting paid to come in and do every day. And that's a sad misalignment. The other thing I want to share in this area is that only 27% of employees in the US believe that they can believe in and trust their organization's values. And you talk about a disconnect, and sometimes we wonder, you talk about the rubber hitting the road and why things don't fall into place. Well, it's because the values of the organization might not be aligning with the behaviors and the actions. And it's also because it's not being communicated and your employees, for whatever reason, are not connecting to the expressed values and rituals. I want to talk a little bit about human capital. And one thing I want to say here, especially now, the world has been through a tender spot for the last 12 to 18 months. And what we know is organizations must select, engage, and develop their employees so that the organization's brand, the purpose, and the culture is understood and lived out every single day. And when we do that, we need to be very consistent and we need to be clear and what makes our organization unique and the importance that each employee has within that culture. We know that all people are valued, all people are treasured, all people want to belong. And again, Monte's going to touch on this area more so. But the most important thing is that we very intentionally are linking the human capital, our people, to the purpose and mission and the brand of what we're trying to do. Work teams and structures are also a key driver of culture. And your internal structure should be designed in a way that it actually supports your desired culture. And that structure and those work teams include things like who communicates with whom, how often, and on what topics. It's also things like your processes, your systems, your algorithms, whatever you want to call those. And bottom line, your corporate structure will influence your purpose, your brand, and your culture. So you want to make sure at the outset, or now if you're adjusting and you're nimbly responding, that you're aligning the structure so that it can allow the culture to come to life in the way that you want. And I want to talk about performance. So you're aware, I know you are, that recognition is one of the most powerful influencers of human behavior, right? And Monte's shaking his head. We all know that we're all driven by recognition in some ways. And with that in mind, that includes everything from goal setting to accountability, to pay, to incentives, to your calendars and your meetings. All of those things impact behavior. All of those things impact performance, and all of those things drive your culture. So we want to be very aware, especially now, of those 5 drivers, which are leadership and communication, values and rituals, human capital, work teams and structures, and performance. And how can we set that up so that we can drive success, not just culture, but success? A lot of research has been done on managers, been done on the people side of organizations and businesses. And oftentimes, people will also air quote that and say that that's the soft side of businesses. And And I love to then step right in and say, yeah, you know what? I specialize in the soft side of businesses because that's about where 97% of the work is actually going to happen. And a lot has been done in looking at managers. And then I want to talk about managers right now. It's going to be probably a little bit a tender area. Most of us are managers on some level. Most of us we're all impacted by managers that surround us. And so the heart and pulse of every business is guided by managers. And they're the most important role in every organization. And so we want to make sure that we give the most thought to our managers, because your culture lives and dies every day through your managers. And it's how they act, it's how they behave, it's how they live out your purpose, your brand, and your values that then impacts employees and then impacts bottom line health business. We also know that your managers have more influence on your company's culture than any single person or group of people in the organization. And it's how the leaders act, which we've said before. It's not just what they say, right? Because words oftentimes can really be meaningless if behaviors don't match. And it's the way the leaders act that give workers the faith in the leadership and builds the brand that communicates the mission. And one of the things also is, I like to call building a culture of higher purpose over profit. And what is that higher purpose? What do we mean by that? And we touched on this a little bit earlier, but this is a different stat, and this is very interesting. Only 15% of employees in the United States are actually engaged while they're at work. And so that means 85% are not engaged, or worse, they're actively disengaged. So it's one thing to not be engaged, but to then be actively disengaged means they could potentially be wreaking havoc in the workplace, doing things that are subversive to the culture or subversive to the mission. And that does have a direct impact on your business's bottom line health. And again, it's all about what is it that we can do to drive the culture so that we can engage and re-engage more of those people. This quote I think is very interesting. So listen to this. When leaders and managers begin to live out a clear, consistent, aligned culture that inspires high commitment, employees begin to believe in and live out the organization's purpose in their daily work. Ultimately, they're delivering on their brand promise in a genuine and powerful way. I'm going to step back to one of the stats I just gave you. Only 15% of employees are engaged at work. If you're trying to figure out how to turn your business around, engage your workers. And so now you're saying, well, gosh, Nance, that's interesting. That was a bit of a downer. Thanks for sharing that. What do I do now? What are the steps that we do now? And we have to understand our realities, right, in order to move our organizations forward. And so, when we look at this, it is when the leaders and managers are engaged that the employees become engaged. So part of what we'll talk about for the rest of today and then next week is what are the things that we can do to engage? And this is where I know Monte will step in, because there's hope. There's hope in all of us as a team, as an organization, and there's hope in all of us as individuals. And so I'm going to step out now and allow Monte to come in and share some of his areas.
So it's fantastic the way that Nancy set all this up, and you're good at something when you make it look really easy, and she made all that seem so easy and so simple, but trust me, there are hours and hours of, as she calls, mining information to present all that, and what an awesome job that she did. So here, the way I look at culture, she did a great job describing the importance of culture. Think of it as the body, but the body is made up of cells, and each of these cells will impact the body over time. How cells divide determines whether the body is going to be healthy or whether it's going to create a cancer or some other difficulty in the body. So we have to look at the big macro, but we also have to look at the micro. Let's go to the next slide here. And so Nancy was talking about all of these, you know, undesirable behaviors, and they're created from, you know, these things that I'm about to share here. And, you know, now this is an interesting thing coming from an Army guy. Okay, individuals want to feel, okay, because when I was in the military, they told us that if we wanted you to have feelings, we would give them to you. All right, so that culture was not very healthy for me and a lot of other people, but I mean, it was good for me in a lot of ways. But the point there is if we don't take into consideration how we make people feel within this culture, it's definitely going to have a negative impact. And Nancy mentioned this, only 15% of people are engaged. Well, actually 100% of the people are engaged. They're just not engaged in what they need to be doing. They could be engaged at, you know, having a negative impact upon the culture. And just as each body is unique and each cell is unique, each individual is unique. And as you read this list, not everybody in the culture is going to feel this all the time. Okay, but in
Amanda?
Monte, we lost your sound.
probably depends upon who I am, but everybody wants to have meaning in their work. Okay, they just don't want to be there. Well, I can't say some people just want a paycheck, but in a culture that we're all trying to create, people, that what attracted them to the culture was something that they could contribute either to society or to the culture in general, or they want to have they want to walk away with that, hey, my work and my life is making a difference, and we need to let them know that. They also want to feel respected, and respect comes in different shapes and sizes. Okay, so like when I was in the military, you know, we did respect by saluting, yes sir, or no.
Monte, your sound is coming in and out.
Respect, are they minimized, are they neglected, are they marginalized? People, they want to feel like their ideas and their input counts. Everybody wants to feel appreciated. Now we have different ways of expressing that, like your company may give out awards for appreciation, in which, you know, some people respond. Okay, for example, an award would be like a gift. Some people really respond well as the gift. Some people respond well more to words of affirmation. In other words, that they are, you know, some way, somehow, that it's known to the whole culture of the impact that this person's efforts are having. So appreciation comes in different shapes and sizes. And the reason I used that body and the cell illustration, because each cells respond differently. Different cells and different organs respond differently. And think about what Nancy said about the managers. I really appreciate the way she took the time to do that. What I should have put on that previous slide is that the managers are like organs. So we have cells, individuals, managers, organs, and now we have the body, which is the culture. And so somehow, some way, those managers, they're the grunt work people that are making others feel these ways. So that's why they're so important. So, and everybody wants to feel trusted. Now, the tricky part is some people are
Monte, we can't hear you.
whatever the situation is, because like if you look at the word trusted, if you underline us, that there's no trust, there's no us. Okay, so the culture really has to create an environment where people feel trusted, and they got to feel valued. And I mean, everybody wants to feel like they're making some impact. That they as a person, that they are presenting some sort of value to whatever is being produced at your company, whether it could be value to the culture, it could be value to the bottom line, it could be value to the profit margin. It doesn't really matter, but they want to feel valued for what they do. And then connected. You know, of course, now people are working remotely. It's so difficult for people to feel connected, but even through Zoom, even through meetings like this, they can feel connected, because when people feel disconnected and then they get disenfranchised and then they get discontent, and then that's when things can really start going poorly with them within the culture. And the culture has to have ways to connect people. Some people, you know, they go off for retreats, or they go off for meetings, they get out, they do things, they do fun things, there's just all kinds of ways to help people feel connected. And then, I mean, these aren't all the needs, but these are the main ones. And then everybody needs to feel accepted. In other words, like, you know, for example, let's say you got a new hire and he's working in it, or she's working in an organization or a group where most of the people are 10, 20 years older than him, seniority. And if he's not feeling accepted for who he or she is, and that they bring something to the table in spite of their lack of experience or their education or whatever, they're not going to really feel accepted. And when one or more of these is missing, people are going to struggle, and that's just what keeps them from being connected, like Nancy said. But the more of these needs that we meet, the better off the individual do, and therefore better off the culture will be. Back to you, Nancy.
Thank you, Monte. That was awesome. And so I think it's so interesting to be able to understand and to balance the interplay of the individual with the organization. And how do we constantly edify, empower, and inspire the individuals so that the organization does fulfill its brand promise, can live out its purpose, and can affect change within the culture. And so what I want to share right now are 4 phases of culture change. And as we go through this, I want you really to be thinking of your organization, and I want you to be mindful of what Monte was just sharing about what individuals need. And so I know I've had the opportunity with very large organizations to go in and do culture transformations with universities, with healthcare systems, and with other larger private organizations. And organizations can get so focused on the change that needs to occur. We need to get from A to B, Nance, so that, and along the way, most often, the individual is forgotten. And so I want to make sure, as we talk about these 4 phases of cultural change, that we remain ever mindful and ever intentional of what Monte was just sharing. So the first phase of cultural change is understanding what your current culture is. You need to go in, either have a third-party person or undertake doing it yourself, but listen to all the stakeholders. Listen, I call it do the 360 listen, and hear what everyone is saying and how they're describing your culture. You need to know what it is right now so you can move into tomorrow. Phase 2 is to be able to define the gap between your aspirational culture, which is what you want it to be, and your actual culture, which is what it is right now. And you want to be able to describe the behavior that you want to see in your aspirational culture. And so often there will be a fairly deep disconnect with where you are currently and where you want to go. And that's okay, because that's why we transform, right? That's what innovation is all about. So that's an okay thing. The most important factor is being able to describe the behavior that you want seen across the culture. So phase 3 is going to be now design and align activities, initiatives, and systems. So what's it going to take? How do you do it? What are the mechanisms? What are the safeguards? What are the metrics that are going to be used so that you can make the behavior not just be wanted, but become a change and become permanent? We've already discussed with some pretty alarming stats that employees are not engaged, but we also know at the same time, again, there's hope. There's always hope. We know that engaged workers are happier, they're healthier, they're more productive, and they help generate more profit. And so it does make sense. It is valuable to slow down and consider the individual, not just focusing on the direction that the change needs to occur, or just, oh my goodness, this is where we are. And I know a lot of people who know me will hear me say it. If you don't know the direction you're headed, let's figure out what your best next steps are. Well, most of that is going to surround making sure that your employees feel valued, trusted, respected, heard, appreciated. And that's where your business will actually turn around. That walks us right into the fourth phase, which is establishing accountability and ongoing assessment. You need to have something like a SMART goal. You need to have something that will hold you accountable, that will demonstrate you're getting from point A to point B, something that you can measure. And it also, you want to make sure that you're building intentionally a workplace culture that engages your workers. I'll go back and continue to say 15% of employees in the United States feel engaged with their organization's values and purpose. And that's alarming. If your company is doing great things, imagine what you could do if 20% were engaged. Or goodness, 45%, go for the moon, maybe 52%, I don't know. But just imagine the outcomes that you could have. And I don't mean just revenue, right? We were talking about a higher purpose, a higher value purpose. But imagine the impact you could have in your community and in society if your purpose aligned with your values and your employees were actually engaged with your culture. I think that's where it can get staggering. So let's look at this. Changing culture takes time. We know that. You can't turn a ship on a dime. It's just not going to happen. And most organizations are like freighter ships. And while organizations who work on improving mostly employee engagement can see results, positive results in about a year, the organizations who work on changing the company culture, the whole company culture, usually see the strongest gains in about 3 to 5 years. And what I want to share with that is the companies who seek to change the culture, it's not that it takes 3 to 5 years to occur. It's because it is such a process of accountability. Those gains then are felt for 10 to 15 years. So again, imagine slowing down to take the time to focus on the individuals and help them feel appreciated, connected, and engaged. And that accidentally increases your business health by 45%. I think that'd be kind of worth it. What I want you to do right now is go back to those 3 things that you wrote down about your organization, regardless of where you are in the organization. Look at those. And I want you to think right now, based on those 3 things, what could you do to enhance, maybe to redirect, or possibly just absolutely change and alter those 3 things about your culture? Spend just about 30 seconds and think about this based on what you've just heard. How could you transform those right now to positively impact your culture? I'm going to read one more quote to you, and I appreciate you allowing me to share all of this. And then Monte and I are going to do takeaways and wrap up. So there's a ton of research on conversation, and it's very interesting. And again, this goes to what Monte was sharing. Conversation is the foundation of organizational culture. As the single activity that touches every aspect of your organization, and it's everything from operations to sales and marketing to strategy to customer service and more, conversation is critical to the success of your priorities. The quality of the conversations at your organization has the power to accelerate or to undermine everything you do. And I'll go back to the opening quote that we started with. You'll never exceed the limits culture sets on your work together, because culture, like the air we breathe, is everywhere and touches everything. And so when you think about culture and you think about conversations, one of the things that you want to be mindful of is if the success of your culture, the success of your bottom line business health could be as simple as reframing and redirecting conversations, imagine what could happen. Let's jump into our takeaways. So here's some of the things that Monte and I believe that we've pulled forward for you and we'd like you to walk away with. Cultural transformation is a purposeful journey. It's not an event. You can't do a weekend retreat and then think that suddenly you have changed your entire culture. And when you walk back in on Monday morning, all things will be different. It is a journey that you have to decide is worthwhile and that you're willing with everyone in the organization to pursue the journey. Encourage and empower quality conversations. Be aware and be mindful of what and how people are speaking. And remember that conversations are what transform cultures, because that's what helps edify what people feel. Culture accounts for up to 40% of the differences between high and low performing organizations. And if culture is driven by conversation, be aware of the conversations. And one of the things I think, not lastly, certainly most important, or they're all important, but really important, is how a leader defines and shapes culture literally determines the success and failure of all the strategies. And we talked earlier about managers, and it's something to think about as we leave today. How the leader defines and shapes the culture directly determines the success and failure, not just of the strategies, but of the organization. What we'd like to do right now is open it up for Q&A. If there's anything, Amanda, that you're seeing that someone has a question on or about, Monte and I would be thrilled to jump into that.
I don't have anything in the chat or the Q&A yet, but a question I do have, because we do have several nonprofits on the call. So when we're talking about a culture transformation within the organization, when it comes to nonprofits, there is that delicate balance with having a board of directors as well as a staff. Can you maybe talk about how much needs to be held within the staff and how much would need to be with the board of directors? And at what point do you bring them together to make that transformation?
Right. And I'll touch on that quickly from an organization perspective. And I would like Monte to touch on that from the person, the individual perspective. From the nonprofit side, always you have to make sure that you're honoring bylaws, you're honoring structure, process, and policies. And when there is an attempt to impact and transform culture, that to me, at least the way that I help nonprofits address this or tackle this, is to invite all of the stakeholders into that conversation, because culture touches every single person. And we also know that culture should be organically bubbling up from within all stakeholders. And so it's my personal belief, I believe, combined with the compelling research out there, that everyone needs to be invited to the table and everyone needs to feel like their voices are treasured, because culture is something that it's always around. And when you do make a cultural change or transformation, that tends to sit out there for 15 to 20 years. Monte, what do you think?
Well, I agree with everything you said, but I think also everybody needs to understand their role in that culture change. So that way they just don't leave the meeting like, okay, the culture is going to change, but they also understand that, okay, well, this is what I need to do or continue to do to enhance that change.
Okay. There are a couple questions that are coming through right now. What are some of the questions a small business owner can ask themselves to determine current state of culture, as it can be part self-reflective for a small business owner with a very small team?
Some of those questions can be, and I do have a discovery session that I walk leaders through in this particular area. It would be things like defining where you are right now. Do you actually live up to and fulfill your mission, vision, and core values? Do people know what the mission, vision, and core values are? Do you have metrics that assess and measure how you live those core values? And two other things that are just critically important is when you look at your people mapping, or you look at your structure, your leadership team, and all people, does the people mapping or the organizational structure allow the culture to actually happen? And a lot of teams and organizational structures are very hierarchical. They're very linear or algorithmic, and information has to just flow typically in one direction. And it doesn't involve all. So example, if your culture is one that treasures everyone's input, that treasures innovation or treasures discovery, yet you have a linear hierarchical organization, you're going to miss the boat every single time because your structure doesn't allow for the culture that you're trying to create. And so I look at things like that. Monte, what about you?
I don't think I have anything to add to that one. I think you covered that one really well.
Mm-hmm.
Those were the only questions we had. Can you talk a little bit about part 2 and what people can look forward to for next week?
Yes, part 2 is going to be very exciting. Monte's going to be talking a ton in part 2, because what we're going to do is shift more from the organizational perspective, the larger team perspective, and go deeper into the individual. And what that will mean is, how can you, regardless of what your role is in the team, what is that you can do to add value to the culture of the organization?
Okay, we'll go ahead and wrap it up here. Everyone that is on the call right now, if you have not already signed up for part 2 next week at 11 a.m., I'll go ahead and I'll email the link to you so you have that and you can sign up and take part in part 2. I just want to thank you, Nancy, and thank you, Monte, for leading this session today, and we look forward to seeing you next week.
That sounds great. Thank you so much, Amanda.
All right, thank you. Have a great day, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.